Greetings and welcome to the Upper Pen Podcast. My name is Dakota and today I'm talking with Johnathan McClain. You might know him from the Nakatomi Plaza, or what he actually does, act in shows like Mad Men and SEAL Team, as well as narrate audiobooks such as Noobtown by Ryan Rimmel and The Last Days of Night by Graham Moore, and even write movies such as The Outfit with Graham Moore and Saucy Books with JA Huss. So,
yeah, you did your diligence, you did your research.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Johnathan, for joining me and putting up with my stupid jokes. I'm sure you've never heard them.
No, I didn't. It's. I actually really appreciate it when a newer generation cottons to that, because for years it was just guys my age who were in their teens in like the late 80s and early 90s. Like I had a UPS driver when I lived in New York who every day would say like, "Get a signature here," and I was like, "Sure," and he'd be like, "All right, and good luck out there, Nakatomi Plaza, pal." And I was like, you know what, Reggie, it never gets old. Please don't ever stop. Don't ever stop. And funnily enough, outside, we were just chatting before we started recording about where I live here in LA. If you actually go out on my balcony there and look to the left, you can see Nakatomi Plaza from my front balcony, which is awesome.
That is pretty great.
It's pretty great.
So were movies like that how you got into acting, or what happened? How'd that work?
Oh, how did I start acting?
Yeah.
Like real answer. Real answer is I don't know that I ever believed that I was truly loved, and when people pay attention to you and laugh and applaud and do those things, it creates the illusion of being loved. It stimulates the same, whatever, adrenaline and, norepinephrine and, things that I don't actually know about scientifically, but I know that they exist in the human body and they trigger and they fire. Get triggered, and I got addicted to that feeling. And I think that then I saw when I was, I was pretty young, a theater in the town that I grew up in, South Carolina, had the audacity to, and I mean that sincerely, to do a double bill of The Normal Heart and As Is, which were the two plays about the AIDS epidemic in the early 80s. And in Columbia, South Carolina, like you can imagine, that was not welcome. And so, but I saw that and I was like, oh, acting can also do this. It can say this. And like, these are feelings of emotion that are, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And it's dangerous and it's pissing people off. And, and you get the adrenaline rush of being applauded for and feeling, you know what I mean? And so that was sort of like where the genesis of it really, I mean, truly. And then from there, it was just like, I went to a performing arts high school, and then I wanted to go to like a conservatory training program, but it didn't work out for lots of reasons, most of them economic. And so I went to Chicago, where a buddy of mine was living, and he was at the theater school at DePaul. He and I had gone to the performing arts high school together, and lived with him. And I kicked around in Chicago for a little while, and wound up like writing a one-man show and moved it off Broadway, off Broadway, and it was technically off Broadway at an off Broadway house, but like it wasn't for it. Whatever, it did fine, and I did what I needed it to do. And then I wound up in New York, and I was there for years. And it's funny you ask about movies and whatever. I loved going to movies as a kid. I loved like sitting in a dark theater so much and escaping into that. But I don't know if I believed that I could do that. I did think I could do theater, right? Which is why I went to New York and did theater. I never really even thought about doing film and television. And then it sort of found me, and I got on a show. I got on a couple of shows, like right away, right when I first got out to LA. And I was like, oh, this is easy. I'm just going to do this. It's not easy. as it turns out. But by that time, I had sort of committed to it, and then that's kind of how I wound up in film and TV. And then you just alluded to the fact that my friend Graham and I have a movie that's actually out in theaters right now. And, you know, I think a lot of people who didn't know my background in theater think that I've come to writing lately, but, you know, my whole career began because I wrote a thing that I did. And so I've always wanted to figure out how to do both of those things simultaneously. And so that's like an unexpectedly detailed answer to a simple question, but that's how I wound up sitting in front of you today where I am. So
it's never a simple question. Like people always have really great answers.
Yes, it's not a simple question. I don't know that there are. I don't know that there are. If you're a nuanced thinking person, I don't know that there are simple questions. Certainly there are no simple answers.
True. So that kind of explains how you got out to LA and you started with movie or TV primarily and movies. How did you get into narrating too?
Yeah. So, God, I was funny enough, I came out to LA for years up until the pandemic. I actually tried to still do a play a year because I just love it. And there's actually a ton of theater in LA because everybody's trying to get agents. So they're like showcasing things. So there's opportunities to do stuff. And I was doing a production of George Bernard Shaw's Candida. And at that time I was 38 years old playing 18-year-old Eugene Marchbanks, which I've just accepted at this point that, you know, invariably someone's always going to ask me if I'm on vacation with my folks or something, like till the day I die at this point. But I was doing a play, and the guy, this wonderful narrator who actually he's narrated hundreds of books, but I think probably the one that is most sort of funnily enough, the one that dovetails with my life and that might be the most recognizable is he narrated the Maze Runner series. And which is funny because Dylan O'Brien is in the movie that I wrote with Graham. So Dylan and I are now buddies. But his name is Mark Deakins, and he's just great, and he's a great narrator and actor. And I knew that he would come to the theater some nights with his voice a little hoarse. I was like, "Why? You okay?" He's like, "Oh, I've been narrating all day." "Oh, what do you mean you've been narrating all day?" "I narrate all day." "Well, tell me more about that." And he was like, "Oh, it's this and this and this, and this is how you do it." And you go to a studio, and he was narrating for Random House at the time. And he was like, "So, you go to Random House and you go to their recording studio." He's like, "I have a studio at my house, and I can either do either or." I said, "Well, that feels really tiring." He goes, "Yeah, it is." He goes, "But it's nice to be able to have the responsibility of telling the whole story, right?" And I'll circle back, but in the years since I've equated it to if doing film and TV is like running wind sprints, because it is. Right, they call action, you run, they cut, you stop, get your breath, go again. Doing a play is like running a marathon. You go on the stage and you do the play. So narrating an audiobook is like running an ultra marathon, right? Like one of those 160-mile things. But there's something deeply, deeply satisfying about that. And I said, "Well, I'm curious. Let me know, how I can get into this." And he referred me to the people at Random House, and they had seen the play, and they were like, "Yeah, come on in." And I did a little thing for them. And then I didn't hear from them again for like 2 years. And then what happened was Amazon acquired Audible in the fall of 2012 and basically said, "We have all of the money that anyone will ever need in history. Let's put every book that's ever been written on audio." And there was this production house. There's a lot of independent audiobook. There's the big ones like, Random House has its own thing, right? Like they have their own studios and you go blah, blah, blah. But then there's lots of just like production houses that do audio books for other companies. So it's like Hachette or Simon & Schuster might outsource to somebody to do theirs or whatever. And this production house had QC'd, had quality checked the book that I had done for Random House. And they found out about me. And they said, "We have 3 of the early Jack Reacher novels." And at that time, the movie hadn't come out yet, the first one. They were like, and the guy who does the Jack Reacher narration, he's been doing it since the beginning. So he is older in the same way that Reacher is older. This is now 3 early books, so they need a younger Reacher voice. And Lee Child listened to a bunch of samples, and he wants you to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. Because I didn't actually know what I was stepping into at that time, because I hadn't really heard of it. I didn't know who Jack Reacher was then. And I kind of was like, all right, cool, I'll do that. And I did it. And it was the first time that I learned like how enthusiastic audiobook listeners are and how attached they get to the thing that they are comfortable with. Because boy, did they not like me doing that. Man. And in fairness, they were my first books. If I had known that I was going to be doing like the most popular book series I would ever do, probably to start, I would have maybe said, I don't know, let me practice first, or come back to me when I've learned a little bit more. I'm a little more seasoned. Because, you know, it's funny. I actually recently reached out to Random House and said, because I think they own them. And I said, you know, I would happily redo them again for free, just so they're like, you know, better. But that was how I got into doing it. And I had just come off a TV series that I was the lead on, and it had been on for a couple of seasons. It was weird that it was weird, right? Because I was the lead on a series, and it was a very exciting time because it was my face that was on billboards and like buses and stuff, but no one watched the show. And it's hard to feel like when you're the face of a thing and it doesn't succeed, like it's hard not to feel like that's your fault. And I think for me, I kind of just wanted to like hide for a little while. I remember saying no to auditions and saying no to offers, and it was like, oh, I can just I can still get my performance Jones satisfied by like locking myself in a dark room with no one judging me. Yes, please. I'll do that for a while. And then from there, it just, you know, the thing about audiobooks that's interesting is obviously you hope that they're good and people want to hire narrators who are good. And I know that, you know, you've actually interviewed a couple of, you know, some of the world class narrators. Like Travis is, you know, is about as good as it gets, right? But also it's a bit of a factory. I mean, the volume of audiobooks getting cranked out is pretty intense, and so they need people who are efficient. And I'm pretty efficient. Like because I was in theater for so long, I did Shakespeare for so long, so like I don't make a ton of mistakes, and so I can go for several pages at a time. And candidly, since audiobooks are paid by the finished hour, right, as you clearly know, the more in line with that finished runtime you can actually get. You know, if it takes 6 hours to record 3 hours, suddenly your rate's cut in half and everybody's losing money. So the more efficient you are, and I was pretty efficient. And so I just sort of started getting more opportunities, and now like between my pseudonym, my erotica pseudonym, because as I said to someone recently, if you're a guy and you have kind of a baritone and you narrate audiobooks, eventually someone will ask you to narrate erotica. And I don't do it because I'm ashamed of it or anything. Obviously, I've written erotica with Julie, with JA Huss, but which is its own other fucking story. But I do it because it's like I also narrated a YA series, and I don't want some mom in the car being like, oh, what else has Johnathan narrated? Chip, or whatever her son's name is. Let's listen to this. Ooh, what an interesting title. The cover's so unique. You know, I mean, whatever, right? I don't want So I use this. So between the two, I've probably narrated now almost 200 audiobooks in the last 10 years, which is by no means a record, because full-time audiobook narrators, you know, can do more than that. But it feels like a lot. You know, it feels like a lot.
You're also doing a bunch of other stuff too, though. Like you wrote The Outfit with Graham Moore, and you write with JA Huss, and you write TV shows too, don't you?
Yeah, I've sold a few TV shows. Hilarious. It's funny. People who don't do a deep dive on my on my CV. Like people in the outfit came out. So this is this movie that I wrote that's out in theaters. I wrote with an Academy Award winner. It stars Mark Rylance, who's an Academy Award winner. Dick Pope, who's an Academy Award winner, shot it. Gemma Jackson, who's an Academy Award winner. Did the production design. Billy Goldenberg is an Academy Award winner. Cut the movie. Like the pedigree is super high, and so people have been looking into like, well, who's this guy who wrote this movie with Graham Moore? And his only other writing credit is 4 episodes of a Disney Channel show. And they're like, how does that happen? And I'm like, well, if you look a little more deeply, there's a better answer to that question. But yeah, I mean, I'd written the Disney show because my friend Kali was on it. Kali Rocha, who's an actress, and she played a mom on a show called Liv and Maddie, and she got like 1 episode a season in her contract that she could write, and so she basically conscripted me into service to help her write those. So I did that, and I've written some other TV pilots, and some other things that didn't sell, and some things that almost blah, blah, blah. And in fact, the way that I wound up writing the books with JA Huss, Julie Huss, who, for those who might not know, well, I presume anybody who's going to listen to this or watch this understands what self-publishing is and understands that, right? So, Kindle changed the world. And Amazon changed the ability to fulfill your dreams as a writer by self-publishing. And, it's really funny because I think there's still, quick digression here, I think there's still a weird stigma attached to it in the traditional publishing industry. And, some of these self-published authors are making hella more money than some of my friends who have big time publishing deals, But precisely what happened with how I started to write with Julie, and you didn't ask that question, but I'm going to answer it anyway, is because she actually, okay, so yes, I've written a bunch of stuff. In fact, in addition to the outfit, I'm writing a movie right now with Amy Kaufman, who is the co-author of the Illuminae series with Jay Kristoff and the Aurora series with Jay, and she's written a bunch of books with Megan Spooner. I met Amy. She's Australian. She lives there. I met Amy because I narrated some of her books. One of them is this book, Illuminae, which in 2015 won Audiobook of the Year in its category for multi-voiced audiobook. And unbeknownst to me at that time, there was this self-published erotica writer, New York Times best-selling erotica writer, sitting on her ranch in Colorado, she's this huge sci-fi fan. It's like her favorite thing. She listens to this book, Illuminae, and she had just topped the New York Times bestseller list, like bumping 50 Shades with one of her books, which is crazy. And got her first like proper audiobook publishing deal. This company, Podium Audio, reached out to her and said, who publishes Ryan, and they reach out to her and they're like, we've got a deal for you. We want to do X, Y, and Z of your books. And we've got this guy and that guy, and like big names in male romance narration. And she was like, great. And I also, for 2 of my books, I want this guy, Johnathan McClain. And they were like, who the fuck is Johnathan McClain? And she was like, well, he narrated like this book that I loved, and can you find him? And they tracked me down and they said, do you want to narrate her books? And I said, do you pay in American dollars? And they said, we will. And I said, yes. And I need to use a pseudonym and blah, blah, blah. So I narrated her books, and I don't know how to say this politely, so I won't try. They were better than they needed to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know if you find this to be true, but genre readers will give anything in the genre that they like a try. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that they also will excuse a lot of if it hits certain things that they're looking for. So when I say it was better than it needed to be, it would have been a perfectly satisfactory romance erotica book, a couple of books, if it hadn't been as well written as it was, right? It would have met its necessary requirements, but it was better than that. And one of them in particular had some deep, deep understanding about the human psyche and emotions that left me really like an exploration of what it means to be human. And I was like, oh my God, I was kind of wrecked narrating it after I got past all the naughty bits, right? And so I I reached out to her on Twitter and I said, hi, my name's Johnathan. I know you sought me out. Thanks for that. No offense. Why aren't you traditionally published? Or why aren't you writing sci-fi or whatever? And she was like, this is what I do, and it works really well for me. And I was like, well, that's very cool. I was on an airplane the following week with my friend. Her name's Lindsay, and she is the executive at MGM Television who brought Handmaid's Tale to TV, to Hulu. Hulu. And she was doing the press stuff for that. And as we were getting off the plane together, I said to her, by the way, and I had developed a TV series with her before, and I said, by the way, I might have access to an interesting series of books that are New York Times bestsellers. Would you be curious to hear what they're about? And she's like, yeah. So I went back to Julie, the writer, and I was like, you ever thought about turning your stuff into a TV show or anything? And she said, I mean, I don't know how to do that. I live on a ranch in Colorado. I was like, well, I live in LA and I do know how to do that. So would you be up for that? And she's like, well, yeah, how would we do it? Would they just read them and option them, or how would we do it? I was like, I think that there's a couple ways, but I think persuasively the best way to do it is maybe if I wrote a pilot to just show what's possible. So I did. I wrote the pilot and they bought it. They wound up optioning Julie's books and they put that into development. And Julie shot me an email one day and was like, call me. So I called her and she goes, I really love the way that you interpreted my work and da-da-da-da-da. You want to write romance novels with me? I was like, no, I really don't. That's not something I want to do even a little bit. And she was like, why not? And I said, well, let me think about the answer to that. And I said, I guess it's probably because of my individual prejudices or preconceptions about what this is and who reads it and da-da-da-da-da. She was like, yeah, maybe you should take a look at that, dude. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So I did some self-reflection and I said, well, what would we write about? And she said, I don't know. What have you always wanted to write about? And I said, well, actually I have a TV series that never got made, but the premise of it is this guy and he's, it doesn't matter. You guys can go read the books. And I said, I guess we could take like this central character and turn him into a romance hero. And, I don't know. I said, but I only want to do it if we can really do something special. I want to create an extended allegory that talks about, this and that and the other thing. She was like, oh, so you don't want to sell books? And I was like, no, I do. She was like, okay, but this is what has to happen. I said, well, why does what you're saying and what I'm saying have to be mutually exclusive? Like, why can't we figure it? And we did. And in fact, what wound up happening as a result of that, and this story is still being written, is we were not able to successfully sell her book series as a TV show. But every room we went into, and I remember Netflix specifically was like, yeah, the pitch is cool, but talk more about this. You're writing romance with this woman who lives in Colorado and you're this TV actor and she's this reclusive and you guys aren't romantically and you're married to somebody else, but you're writing romance. That sounds like a show. And the executives at MGM were like, well, then let's figure that out. So we're still sort of figuring out if that has a life. So that's sort of how that came to be. And then weirdly, I credit the fact that I wrote a movie with Graham to the fact, and I don't know, if he sees this, I hope he doesn't take this as a pejorative because I don't mean it as insulting. I think that he thought of me as his actor friend, even though he knew I wrote, until I published some books that like did well, right? Like that sold well and people liked them. And then suddenly he was like, oh, I guess you are a real writer. And his wife read them and she was like, no, these are hot. These, and so he was like, oh, cool. Well, let's write a movie together. So my romance writing career, I think, is the reason that I wound up writing a movie with an Oscar winner and now am a produced screenwriter. And so circling all the way back to your original point, yes, I do a lot of things and I'm very busy and I still, like audition for stuff and shoot TV shows when they come along and so forth. And to put it in the parlance of the literary world, it's funny. I used to think my life, when I was starting out, I really sort of was like, I'm writing the book of my life. I don't know if anybody writes the book of their life. I think that our lives are just a collection of short stories, you know? And I'm now in like the 15th or 16th chapter that if you wrote the actual thing down as a memoir, people would probably, Million Little Pieces me. They'd not believe that any of this shit was real because it's just such a weird series of twists and turns that it's taken. Does that answer anything that you're curious about?
Yeah. And the weird twist kind of comes in handy because how did you get started with Ryan Rimmel and Noobtown? Because that seems dramatically different.
That owes to the foresight and creative brilliance of a woman called Tamra Marston, who is the head of casting for Podium Audio. She is the one who, assigns the books, right? And I got into Podium's universe because of the narrating for Julie, and then I was writing with Julie, and then they published our books that we wrote together, and then I narrated our books. So they were very aware of me. And Tammy, great question. I mean, I don't know. She read it and she was like, oh, I know who needs to be the voice of this. I know who needs to do this. And I was happy to say yes and take the gig, and had candidly no idea what LitRPG was. Like no clue. It's funny. I'm not a gamer. I mean, I play video games, but I'm Atari 1 generation. Like I go back. So the whole idea of getting online and interactive and all that freaks me out. But like, I'm sure as hell going to play Gran Turismo 25th Anniversary Edition, So I was like, oh, okay, I sort of understand now that you've explained it to me what this is, and okay, I kind of get it. And so I did the first one. And I didn't know what a fan base it had in terms of the genre. I didn't know the potential that it had. I didn't know. I mean, obviously didn't know Ryan. And at that point, Ryan was still working a day job at that time when he wrote that. He has since quit. He has a publishing deal now. And is a full-time writer, and I'm so happy for the guy because he's a good dude, as you know, having talked to him. And it just and I truly had no idea that it was going to be what it was. And I will not pretend to be someone who does not seek out the things that people say about me online. I do. Because of some weird masochistic streak I have, I guess. But in this instance, the response was like overwhelmingly positive. And I was like, well, that's nice. And then I found out, like, I'm saying like a lot. And then I found out that this was going to potentially be a relationship that would carry me through the next several years as Ryan maintains writing and I record them. And I have this I'll tell you this, nobody's ever written me into the books. I can't remember which book it is. It's either 4 or 5 or 3 or 4. It's one of the books in the middle. Ryan actually titled a chapter for Johnathan. That's the title of the friggin' chapter. And the chapter is constructed solely for it doesn't progress the story. It doesn't do it. It exists solely to put a bunch of tongue twisters in front of me just to screw with me. And then like I was on this other show and it makes there's a line that he kind of does a casual throwaway about my character on that show in one of the chapters. And so it's become this weird symbiotic, like very, I don't know, this mutual appreciation fan club thing that Ryan and I have going with each other, where we just try and my goal is to try and, I'm going to say this the right way, like not lift the material up. That's not it, but really imbue it with as much of what I believe the intention is. And what I think is interesting is that that is my tendency in general, is to want to actually, as a performer, and everything we've talked about, is to want to perform and to want to infuse the work that I'm doing with some life and be a collaborator, right? Collaborate with the author in some way, some unspoken way. And I know there's a couple of schools of thought on that. There are people out there in the world who really don't enjoy that. They feel like it interrupts their enjoyment of a book. They just want the narrator to sound nice and just tell the story. I don't think that that's true in LitRPG. I think LitRPG, now that I understand it better, demands a full-throated investment in it, because it is so over the top, and it is into the world of surreal, and it is heightened reality and magical realism and all of that stuff. And to neglect to really give it that, I feel like is giving it short shrift. And thankfully Ryan agrees, because he's the author. There's definitely a chance he could have heard the first one and said, no, do it over. So I'm really glad he didn't, because I have so much fun with it. And I think that's obvious too, right? You can tell when you're listening that it's a good time for everybody involved. And you know, I know that nothing is for everybody, which is a good thing, because if something's for everybody, then it really means it's doing nothing important or hitting any real, hitting at any heart, right? It's just sort of missing and landing in the creamy middle. And so I'm really grateful that the people who care about the stuff that Ryan's writing have responded to it so well, because I will never let someone's opinion keep me from doing the thing that I believe is right. But it is also never my objective to piss anybody off. I'm not setting out to make someone unhappy, you know? If you are unhappy, I will honor your feelings and continue to also honor mine first. But it would be my preference if we can find a place of accord where you're not so mad at me for the voice of Badgalore or whatever.
Well, I think with LitRPG in general, it's people love the narrators. Like, they love you, they love Travis Baldree, they love Jeff Hayes. Like, there's a following behind you guys now. It feels
interesting. Well, yeah, yes, no question, you're right. I mean, Travis, Jeff, Nick, Podell, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yeah.
Those guys, for real. I think to the point we were making earlier, and I know that Travis also has his own company. I think it's either a game company or these guys also do other things. I feel like some of those guys are more the things they do sort of are tangentially related to a brand that you can really get behind. And again, I feel like Travis and Nick and Jeff, those guys have narrated hundreds and hundreds of books. And I do not pretend to be in their league, because not only are they talented, but their skill sets have developed over just so much practice in doing it. I'll tell a little story. I'll make it as ambiguous as possible, because it's a good story, but I also don't want to know. There is a book that got offered to, a book series that got offered to me last few months ago. And I looked through the book. It's a new one, but the people offering it to me were very high on it, saying like, we think this is going to be a big deal. It's a lit RPG, and we think you will just nail it. I was like, great. I'm pretty stretched right now. I'm about to go on press tour for this movie. Like, let me look. But I read it and I was really into it. And I said, the actor in me can't say no to this. Okay, yes, I'll do it. I was on holiday holiday out of town, and I get a phone call, and it was from one of the producers, and she said, I don't know how to ask you this, but would you be willing to do like an hour-long sample of what you would do? I was like, I do not have the bandwidth to do an hour-long sample. Why? What's up? She said, well, the author, he doesn't know you. And there's another narrator whose name might have just come up in the list of people we were talking about, or it might not have, who he really had in his head, and he really wants them. And I said, look, no, I can't. And I'm not offended or whatever. Like, I'm auditioned for anything. I don't care. But I just don't have the time. It's like, but here's the other thing. I don't pretend to be that dude. And this is a book. He's taken his time to write this book, right? He's cared about it. He's made something. He's believed in it. He's crafted this thing. Give him who he wants. Like, that's fine. Yes, great. And so yes, I've come to learn that there are, real genuine followings, and in the world of, I mean, there's also like R.C. Bray, for example, who does a lot of, I think, R.C. basically is like the sci-fi dude. And Ray Porter, who I happen to have known a little bit, who was also an actor for years before he became a full-time narrator. Yeah, I know that if you go to a book convention, or if you go to, I mean, yes, some of these guys have Comic-Con level followings. Yeah. It's like you're going to see Robert Downey Jr. or something when you go to see them at a book signing. And I think that's just like, I think it's so incredibly amazing for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which being that, I think about this a lot, there are so many gifted, talented people in the world who 20 years ago would not have had an opportunity to showcase their talents and skills. And because of this and the way the world works now, and technology and the way it all exists, you can live in Phoenix, or you can live in Saskatchewan or wherever, and have a full-throated career, literally and figuratively, that brings people joy. Like, what's better than that? It's so good.
Well, so before I even knew that you wrote or co-wrote the outfit, I was so stoked for it. I was like, I am down for this. And then I found out you did it, and I was like, oh my God, now I have to go see it. I'm so excited. And it was great. It's phenomenal, and it's getting great reviews. And it's because I know you, right? I know you from these silly LitRPG books.
Yeah. Thank you. We're really proud of it. It was Graham, it was Graham's directorial debut, and I mean, I won't bore the world with the path to getting it made, but getting any movie made anytime is really hard. Getting a movie made during COVID is impossible. And getting a movie made in London during COVID in the midst of their third lockdown is insane. And that we pulled it off is something that I'm really proud of. And yeah, I'm glad, again, like I said before, I don't want to make people unhappy. I don't want to make people sad or mad or waste an hour and a half of their time or whatever. So obviously I'd prefer people like it than not like it. But it was one of those things where when we finished it, and we were in London and Paris last summer wrapping it all up, and when I watched the final finished, mastered, sweetened, edit, I was like, I want people to like it, but I'm so proud of what we did that I don't really care. And that's a wonderful feeling.
I don't know. I think people are going to like it for a very long time. Like, I think this one is going to stick around. Yeah.
So we open internationally on the 8th, which is what, Friday?
Yeah.
So we open it. Yeah. So from the time we're recording this, having this conversation, it'll be 4 days. So we open on April 8th in the UK and globally. But that's also the day that we go to PVOD, paid video on demand. So like Amazon rental or which is of course different than streaming. You know, this is that phase after the theaters where you pay $20 to rent it, and then eventually it'll go to streaming. But yeah, we go to that on Friday, and yeah, I don't think that the theaters, if you're not a franchise, if you're not Morbius, if you're not Mobius, if you're not Batman, if you're not Spider-Man, they're coming. It's trickling back. It's trickling back, but it's a trickle. And I think that you know, ours is the kind of movie that. Thank you for saying that. And I think it's the kind of movie that, yeah, you will come on TV and you'll be able to watch it. And or you know, it's if you're flipping around on Friday night and don't know what to watch, and you see this thing pop up, I think it's an easy hour and 45 minutes of someone's time. And also for people who, it's funny, for people who don't know Mark Rylance, I'm so glad I wrote it for Mark. Graham and I like wrote that role for Mark, and that we were able to get him blows my mind still. For people who don't know who he is, he has an Academy Award for a movie with Steven Spielberg called Bridge of Spies. Yep. But he also ran the Globe, Shakespeare's Globe in London for 15, 20 years, and is generally considered to be the world's greatest living Shakespearean actor, maybe along with Simon Russell Beale, who's also in the movie. So, I mean, bonkers. But he's never really had a chance to do a full, proper, every frame of the film lead before. And so giving him that chance was also really, really satisfying. I'm so thank you for saying that. I'm so glad you liked it.
Well, you know, how could you go wrong with like a gangster mystery movie or like thriller?
You can go wrong.
Yeah, I suppose.
Again, when you're co-writing it with an Oscar award-winning writer, you up your chances of not messing it up too badly, which is good.
So what are you up to next? Are you going to keep narrating, acting, writing, everything?
I mean, the answer is yes. I'm out with a TV pitch right now with a couple of friends of mine. People might know my friends John and Jamie. They're married, and John played Kripke on The Big Bang Theory, and he played Minnie Driver's husband on Speechless. And his wife Jamie, who's a wonderful actor in her own right, and also is now writing as well. She created a show called American Princess that was on for one season, and now she's an exec on Grey's Anatomy. So the three of us have a thing that we're taking around. So I'm working on that. Graham and I have written another movie that we would like to do. I'm writing a movie with my friend, as I said, Amy Kaufman, which I'm really, really excited about and proud of. I know that Ryan has finished the next installment of Noobtown. So he's finished the first draft. So some point in the next few months, I imagine that'll happen. There's a writer called Sean Inman, who I narrate for, who has a series for, who I just cleared some days in July to do his next book. Random House just reached out to me today with a book that they're asking about my availability in the next few weeks for, which I'll figure it out, I guess. And then I may audition for some things if some things come along. I mean, the most intense it ever got was when I narrated my friend. So Graham is, in addition to being an Oscar winner, as you noted at the beginning, a New York Times bestselling author as well, a Random House author, funnily enough. And his book, Last Days of Night, is wonderful. And he asked me to narrate it, and I said, sure. This was in 2016. I was shooting a TV show, doing a play at night, and then I had a deadline on Graham's book from Random House. So I would go to the studio. The show worked it out so that I could get all my scenes shot out by like dinner, so that I could then run to the theater and do the play. after which I would go out to the suburbs of Los Angeles here into the Valley where Random House's offices are, drive out there, meet my wonderful director, Olivia, who directed that, who would open Random House for me at 11 o'clock at night. And then I would go there and narrate till like 4 in the morning until and then come home, sleep for like an hour and a half, and then go back to set. And I did that for, whatever, like 6 days. And that let me know my limits. That let me know what is possible and what isn't possible. Although the book came out great and it's some of the best reviews I've ever gotten. And I remember the play got really good reviews too. And I think it's maybe because I just didn't have time to think. Because when you overthink things, you get into trouble. And I was just like too exhausted to put any extra energy in anything. But so that's what I've got going on. Oh, and because of everything going with the movie, I never finished a dirty book trilogy that I owe with Julie to her readers. And so there is a third book in a trilogy that I also have to write sometime in the next few months. So, and I have to go officiate my friend's wedding in Italy. And at some point, like, eat dinner with my wife. Like that's the gist of that's the gist of my life right now. What about you? What are you up to? What are you doing?
Oh, sleeping later. Unlike you, apparently.
It's a drag. Well, I make it sound bad. Most of my stuff is just sitting around waiting on a set or sitting in a booth or whatever. My wife is a private chef, and she cooks out of our home for her clients, and her day starts at 5 a.m. and ends at like midnight. And that's in the kitchen and hustling and moving. So I can't complain.
Do you guys eat a lot of takeout?
That's such a great question. Most people are like, "Oh, you're married to a private chef. You must eat so well." I'm like, "You don't get it." By the time she's ready to eat, it's can we get some pizza or bread and toast, or like bread and butter, whatever.
Whatever you can do quick and like.
Or as she says, if somebody else, we go to other people's houses for dinner occasionally, and they're so like, "I'm so nervous to cook for a chef," and she's like, "You are making food for me. It is delicious. I don't care what it is. It's great." So that's next. I mean, I used to think there was a there, and there isn't. Right? There is no there. There is no place where just because I've had a movie made doesn't mean that the next movie is guaranteed to be made. Just because I have a series of books that I've done with Ryan, for example, that have done well, does not mean blah, 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 blah. I think there are people who have figured out how to just sort of keep that thing going, keep the wheels turning. And I credit it in part, I was having this conversation recently, to the fact that I do, in fact, enjoy doing so many things in a society that, get a little reflective here, in a society that I don't know rewards diversity in pursuit. Oh, there's an argument to be made that it doesn't reward diversity writ large. But stepping back, what I mean to say is, in terms of like, I was on a Disney show with Olivia Rodrigo, right? My little friend Olivia has done very well for herself in the last couple of years. And it's almost like she has to eschew, and she was a child, but she's still being asked to effectively sort of eschew the things that she did before this because it sullies the brand, right? And creating a brand is such a big deal. And I'll tell you something, I'm obsessed. I love TikTok. I loved it. I would actually get more work done or get more sleep if I didn't love TikTok so much. I love it. And I have a burner account so that I can just watch stuff. But it very much rewards a thing that you show up for and you get from that content creator, and that's what you do. And I've never been able to, I'm so Alexander Hamilton. I'm just not satisfied. And I can't just do the one thing. And if there's a negative to that, the negative is that it means that every time I end something and start something new, it requires almost a complete revving of the engine from zero again. I know for a fact, I spent the last 2 years basically, I did a little acting, but for the most part, I just worked on this movie. I know for a fact that there will be people out there in the industry who, if my agents call them up and say, hey, how about McClain for this movie or whatever, they'll say, oh, I thought he quit acting. Or where's he been? I haven't seen him in so long. I know for a fact that will happen. And that's the downside to not maintaining a perpetual sort of marketing machine for the thing that you do. But I would suggest that it makes the experience of being alive certainly more dynamic. I get to have a conversation with you that I would not be having if I didn't do all the things I do. And, you know, I'm richer for it, right? So
I'm certainly richer for it.
Oh, stop it. I'm an idiot. I'm an absolute idiot. I'm the worst. I am the worst. I'm the worst. The worst thing about me is I'm such a pseudo intellectual. Like, I happen to have a vocabulary, so I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking
about. That's okay.
It gets me by, though. I'm able to say it really, really well. In any case, so that's it. That's like, you know, I guess the answer to your question is just keep doing what I do and do it as long as they'll let me.
I love the diversity, though. Like, I can pick up a book now and be like, oh, hey, Johnathan McClain wrote this. It's going to be saucy.
Yeah, exactly. You pick up a book, start reading, and be like, Johnathan McClain wrote Johnathan McClain wrote this? Yeah, that's the action you mean to say. A big question mark at the end. Oh, how is that even physically possible? Yeah. Those are the best.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
And if you haven't checked out Noobtown, I don't know what you're doing. And honestly, if you haven't seen the outfit, well, Friday it's going to be available again. So get back out there and do it. As always, thanks for watching and have a great day.